Sundays podcast, a Christian podcast that explores the gospel message and encourages holding God's word close to your heart between Sundays. I'm your host, Nathan. I'm alone today. As promised, Ryland's been talking about it during his solo study. So as promised, here is the start of my solo study. I hope you've had a great time listening to Ryland go through the story of Abraham. I know that I did. I learned a lot from it. I've been a Christian for almost my entire life, and there was a lot in there that I didn't know. So I'm hoping, as we keep doing these solo studies, as we keep getting these episodes out to you guys, that it will be something that you can learn from, rather than, just something that you listen to and you're like, oh yeah, I knew that. So today, to start my solo study, I think it's fitting that we talk about unity. So this is the start of my solo study on unity. And unless the Lord tells me otherwise, I've got it down to a 4-part series covering 4 major aspects of our life. Those 4 parts being unity in the church, unity in the home, unity in the relationships, and then unity in the workplace. So all of these different places that we go to, all of these different places that we're at in our life, right, we need some unity in those places. So to start, right, like I said, we're going to start with unity in the church. What better place to start than at the house of God? Okay, so we're going to start by defining what unity is in the church. And to me, with a little bit of help of some other smarter people than me, unity in the church is believers bound together in Christ, working for Christ. Okay, and I'm a teacher. You guys know that if you've listened long enough. So one of my favorite things to do is give non-examples of things. And so I'm going to give a non-example of what unity in the church is. Unity in the church is not uniformity, or everyone sharing the same roles, opinions, or personalities. It's also not abandonment of your core beliefs in order to believe somebody else's. So if you're going to a church, right, and they're like, hey, you've got to strip everything down of who you were, everything about what you believe, you got to stop, then it's not going to be a unified church. Okay, because it's really hard to get some people to really strip away their core values unless they've been implanted in this system for a really, really long time. Okay, and so we're going to spend the next couple of episodes talking about what unity looks like in these different places, but also how we can achieve this unity and what this unity does for us. So I wanted to start by looking at what unity in the church should do for the church. Right? If we look at what the common goal for a church should be, what the common goal, what the main goal for every church should be, it should be to get the unsaved people in the church. And if that's not your goal, then I think you need to rewrite something. You need to look at something differently and go, okay, here's what we need to do. Okay? So if you look at the word choice in Ephesians 4, verses 3 through 6, that's where we're going to start today. We're going to be in a couple different places. I've got my Bible here. I'm going to read. You'll have to pardon my voice. I don't know what's been going on. Today's the best I've sounded in like a week. So you'll have to pardon the voice here. But we're gonna start in Ephesians chapter 4, down in verse 3, and then read to verse 6. And then we're also going to be over in 1 Corinthians. I'll let you know whenever I switch over there. But in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 3, it says, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, even as ye are called in one hope of your calling, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is above all, and through all, and in you all. Right? And so if we look at the word choice in Ephesians 4, verses 3 through 6, we get the purpose of unity. It's peace. It's a whole lot easier to keep the peace if everyone is working towards that same goal. I think of it like a recipe, okay? And stay with me here, because when I was thinking about what I wanted to do my solo study on, I had a really hard time coming up, with what the Lord wanted me to talk about. And it was a couple Sundays ago, I was making chili for me and my wife, and I got to thinking about like all these different parts of a recipe, and I was like, it's kind of like the church, kind of like, our daily walk. We've got all these different aspects of it, and if they all work together, it comes out pretty good. But if we leave something out, it doesn't really work. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a recipe here for a second. Each individualized ingredient on its own might be really good, right? I think about like chili, okay? I was putting beef in the chili. Beef by itself is pretty good. Beans by themselves are pretty good, right? All of these different things by themselves are relatively okay. But it's when you put them together in one pot that it makes everything taste really good. And if you leave something out, it might not taste that different. I think about, the recipe I was using called for vinegar. Well, I didn't have any vinegar, so I didn't put it in there. I don't know if it tasted any different if it had vinegar, because I've not tried it with the vinegar. But it's kind of like that, though. If we leave something out, it might not taste as good as it could, but it's still going to be okay. But let's look at it like a church. Okay, if one person isn't in unity, yeah, the church can still work. Yeah, the church can still do stuff. But it might not be as good as it can be if everyone was in unity. Okay? So we're going to look at verses 4 through 6 again. I'm going to read them again. Okay? It says, "There is one body and one Spirit, even as ye are called in one hope of your calling, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is above all, and through all, and in you all." There's a common word there that sticks out again and again, and it's the word one. There's not multiples of anything. Okay, I teach math. There's not multiples. The word multiple means there's more than one. There's not more than one of anything mentioned in those verses. There's one Lord, one faith, one baptism. There's one body. There's one Spirit. There's one God and one Father. There's one of all of those things, not multiple. There's not multiple spirits that call people, or multiple bodies of the Lord, or multiple faiths. No, there's one, because if there was more than one, then there would be division, and division is the opposite of unity. I'm going to say that again. Division is the opposite of unity. And I want to revisit something that I said just a second ago, right? I said there's not multiple bodies of the Lord. Yes, I know that there's multiple places where people that are in the body of Christ meet. And I want to talk about that. Yes, I know there are so many different churches. Me and Ryland, we went through one time and we tried to name all the different churches that we could think of just in our town. Right? Me and my wife have done it before. We've been driving somewhere and we've counted all the different churches that are around from our house to wherever it is we were going. But we're all working, or we all should be working. Let me rephrase that. We all should be working for the same goal. Every church that's in your town, or every church that's in my town, or in your state, or my state, or wherever it is that you're listening at, right? They all should have the same goal. Right? And I talked about that earlier, right? The same goal was to get the unchurched or the unsaved in. That should be the goal. That should be what we strive for. It shouldn't be to run our numbers up to make another church look bad. It shouldn't be to run our numbers up or get our money up or do this or do that so another church loses a bunch of people. No, it should be to get the unchurched in our area in and get them saved. So that way we can work more in unity. We can add more to our unity. We can have more people working so that way more can get done. Verse 6 tells us that we have one God and one Father. So that should be what keeps us all working towards the same goal. It's not a competition between churches to see who can bring in the most people. Instead, it's again about getting those unchurched, unsaved people in the door. All right, and if you're sitting here and you're listening and you're going, you know what, Nathan, that place you read from Ephesians, it's not for me, right? You've cherry-picked it, you've pulled something from it to try to get your point across. I promise you I haven't done that, but also I want to give you something else that might help you. So if you turn over to 1 Corinthians chapter 1, maybe there I can give you a little bit of help. Okay? We're going to be in verse 10. I'll give you just a second to get there. But in verse 10, Paul writes, "Now I beseech you, brethren, by the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that ye all speak the same thing, and that there be no divisions among you, but that ye be perfectly joined together in the same mind and in the same judgment." Okay, so we talked about in the very beginning of this episode that unity wasn't, everyone sharing the same ideas or everyone sharing the same everything, really. But at the same time, Paul writes that there is supposed to be no division among the people. Instead, we're supposed to be joined together, and he uses the word perfectly joined together. Perfectly joined together. I've never met anybody that's perfect. I've met Jesus before, right? Jesus came into my life, and he's the only person that I've ever met that's perfect. So who else should we be joined together through than Jesus if we want to be joined together perfectly, right? You get a group of people together, you get a group of 5 people together, 4 out of the 5 are going to agree on one thing, and that other one's not going to agree with them. You get a group of 400 people together, it's going to be the exact same thing. But the only way that people can agree on everything together and people can be perfectly joined together is through Christ. So again, instead we're supposed to be joined together, again, like the ingredients of a recipe. Everything works together. When you put together the recipe correctly, everything works to where you taste it all together. It's not like, oh, well, here's this that I'm tasting. Oh, well, here's this that I'm tasting. Or I'm getting a hint of this in the recipe. No, it should be everything works together to give like a harmonious, a union, I'm trying to think of a word here, a great flavor to whatever it is that you're making. And so if we look at it in the sense of a church, right, we're all supposed to be working. There's not supposed to be division. There's not supposed to be anybody, pushing any harder or pulling any harder than anybody else. We're all just supposed to be working together to create a place where the unsaved and the unchurched can come in and experience what God is and experience the same things that we have experienced with God and get the same things that we have got from God. And I know what you're thinking. Nathan, you just said that if you get a group of people together, you really can't get them to agree on anything. And yes, you would be right. If you don't believe me, come sit in my 6th grade classroom and let me ask them a question and you watch all the different answers that I get sometimes. Okay? But at the same time, we talked about how if you're perfectly joined together by Jesus Christ, then there is an opportunity for unity to be there. And really, that should be there. Unity should be there if you're joined together perfectly through Jesus Christ. Okay, so we're going to turn over. I told you we were going to be in 1 Corinthians again. You're going to turn over to chapter 12 of 1 Corinthians, specifically looking at verses 12 through 14. Okay, I'll give you just a second to get there. All right, it says in verse 12, "For as the body is one, and hath many members, and all the members of that body, being many, are one body, so also is Christ. For by one Spirit are we all baptized into one body, whether we be Jews or Gentiles, whether we be bond or free, and have been all made to drink into one Spirit. For the body is not one member, but many." So we find, that the church is made up of different parts, just like the body is made up of different parts. Each part of the body has its own job, yet it all works together to make the body function. Right? You've got eyes that help you see. You've got legs that help you walk. You got feet and ankles that help you stand up. You've also got those connected to your legs that help you walk. You got arms that help you move around. You got hands. I could go on listing all the different parts of the body and all their different functions, but at the same time, you realize, all of those different pieces work together to make my body function. So why wouldn't it be the same for the church? Why would it not be the exact same for the place that I go to worship? Right? We've got all these different people serving all these different roles, doing all of these different things, but at the same time, our goal is to get the unchurched and unsaved in, so that's what our function should be. Right? That's what we should be striving to get to. Again, looking at a church, we've all got many different jobs and different roles. There are roles that I will never be able to fulfill in a church. And there are roles that you listening or you sharing this with somebody or anybody that's going to get a hold of this will never be able to fulfill in a church. But at the same time, there are things that you can do in that church. But still, the goal of the church should be to get the unchurched in and get the unsaved in and give them the same things that we've got. Right? That should be what we should be striving to do. And if our goal is anything other than that, then that's where the disassembly of the church, the unity falls apart. I was looking for the word. The division, that's the word I was looking for. Division in the church will happen, right? Because when somebody stands up or somebody behind the scenes starts to push their own ideas, their own way of doing things, or hey, we've tried this before, but let's try this now. Let's do this a little differently, right? Oh, well, this one over here is not really doing a good job. Or this one over here, I could do their job better, right? If you start going into things with that idea and living that way and pushing those ideas into your life and into other people's lives, you're going going to see your church fall apart. You're going to see division take over. You're going to see all of these different things, and your goals are going to get washed away because you've let something else creep in. You've let something else take the place of what was happening in your church, and now you're left with a church that's ununified. You're left with a church that's divided up, and you're going to have to go find a way to either get the church back together or find a new place to go. And it's a whole lot easier to get people back together than it is to find a good place to go anymore. I think about the church that I go to, right? The church that me and my wife go to. It's a great church. We have a lot of really, really strong believers there. We've got a lot of people doing a lot of things there. And I really wouldn't trade going there or being a part of those services for anything. But I can tell you, look, if the unity fell apart in that church, the church would not be as strong, and the people would have a choice to make. It could either be to leave or it could be to rebuild. And I would hope that as a member of the church, we would choose to rebuild the unity in the church. But that's not always the case, because you've got feet of the church trying to do the hands job. You've got legs of the church trying to do the eyes job. You got the eyes of the church doing the mouth job of the church, right? You've got all these people trying to take on roles that aren't theirs. And that's when the unity falls apart. So to ensure unity stays in your church, do what the Lord's told you to do. It's that simple. Right? If the Lord tells you, hey, stand up and sing this song, stand up and sing the song. If the Lord tells you, hey, look, I want you to go work with this specific group of people, go find a way to work with that specific group of people. Don't sit there and say, oh, well, there's already somebody doing that. Or, oh, I don't really sing the best. Or, oh, God, I don't sing at all. If the Lord tells you to do something, if you want unity to stay in your church, you do what the Lord tells you to do, and you hope that everybody else is doing what the Lord's doing, what the Lord's telling them to do. Because if they are and you are, then unity will stay, and our goal of getting the unchurched in can still be accomplished. Right? And you cannot get the unchurched in unless you are in unity with each other. Again, it all comes back to unity in the church. And I started this series by talking about unity in the church, because if you don't have unity in the church, you really can't have unity anywhere else. But it's also kind of like a pyramid almost, right? Like starting at the top would be unity in the church, and then it works its way down. But you can also start at the bottom, right? And say unity in the church is the first step. Okay, and then we're going to move to the next one, and then we're going to move to the next one, and then we're going to move to the next one. And if I don't start with unity in the church, then I can't get unity anywhere else. I'm going to start trying to wrap this episode up a little bit. I kind of want to keep these a little shorter, like Ryland says, these solo studies. I want to keep them a little shorter. That way we can get our message across, we can get what the Lord's given us across, and then we can get it out to you guys. So I'm going to kind of start wrapping up here. But I don't know if anybody's ever tried to row a boat before, okay? And I don't know if you've ever tried to row a boat with somebody else in the boat. Okay, but rowing a boat by yourself is pretty difficult. Okay, you put somebody else in the boat and you start rowing the same direction, it gets a little easier. But now, you row one way and the person in the boat with you row the other way, and you're not going anywhere. There's nothing going on. So it's great with everyone rowing in the same direction, but let just one person, you say you've got 10 people in a boat together and you're all rowing. You let one person row in the opposite direction and it screws everything up. You let one person sneak in and let the unity get all jumbled up and messed up because they want to do something else. They want to do something that somebody else is doing. Then it's going to mess everything up. You got to guard the unity that's in your church. I'm not saying that you got to put the unity above God, but you got to put God first and then the unity of the church next. Right, God should be your ultimate focus, but then your next focus should be, what can I do to keep the unity in my church? What can I do to keep the people working towards the same goal? And again, you're going to hear it about 800 times during this entire solo series, right? But the unity of the church's goal through unity is to get the unsaved and the unchurched in. Right? And we'll talk about what that looks like in your personal life. We'll talk about what that looks like in your relationships. We'll talk about what that looks like in your home. We'll talk about what that looks like in the workplace. Okay? But I promise you, your goal should be to get the unchurched in and get the unsaved in, so that way they can start helping you do the exact same things. Okay? Work in unity and watch how the Lord will work in your church and in your life. I'll say it again because that's what I want to close with. Work in unity and watch how the Lord will work in your church and in your life. I hope you've enjoyed the start of this 4-part or however many parts the Lord tells me to give out solo study on unity. Again, I'm going to close with the exact same thing that Ryland closed his last one with, because we've kind of decided, hey, that's kind of what we want to end with. He said, it might be corny, you might not like it, hey, but it gets the point across. Just remember, guys, hell's hot and heaven's not. I'll talk to y'all next time. I love you guys.